The rain came down in sheets, the kind that turned Starlight City's back alleys into rivers of black water and made the overhead street lamps blur into smears of dirty yellow light. Lily Chen pulled her jacket tighter across her chest and told herself, for the fourth time that evening, that taking the shortcut through Crescent Lane was perfectly fine. She'd done it 100 times. Nothing ever happened. Thunder cracked so hard it rattled the dumpsters lining the alley walls, and she flinched, nearly losing her footing on the slick asphalt. Her sneakers were already soaked through. Her shift at Perfect Grooming had run 2 hours over, because Mr. Biscuits, the salon's most infamous client, had bitten through his 4th leash and staged a full escape attempt involving 3 shelves of conditioner. She was exhausted, soaked, and smelled faintly of lavender detangling spray. All she wanted was her apartment, her radiator that worked 60% of the time, and the leftovers in her fridge. Then she heard it. Low. Resonant. Something between a growl and the sound a mountain might make if a mountain were badly wounded and furious about it. The sound scraped along the base of her spine, and every rational instinct she possessed screamed at her to run, to sprint, to not look back. She stopped walking. She looked back. Lightning split the sky open, turning the alley white for one frozen second, and in that second she saw it. Crammed between 2 overflowing trash cans, barely contained by the narrow space, was the largest animal she had ever seen in her life. It looked like a wolf, the way a freight train looked like a bicycle. Its fur was dark as ash, matted and soaked with rain and something darker than rain. Blood. A lot of it. Its enormous head was low, muzzle nearly touching the ground, and even from 10 feet away she could see the labored rise and fall of its ribs. One massive paw was extended forward, trembling. Its eyes, when another flash of lightning illuminated them, were an impossible shade of molten amber, burning with intelligence and rage and something that was clearly promising her a very bad end. Lily stood there, rain pouring off the tip of her nose, and said, "Oh my God, you poor giant puppy." Inside the ruins of his dignity, Valerius, Supreme Alpha King, undisputed ruler of Starlight City's shadow empire, the single most feared predator in 400 miles, registered what the tiny human had just called him, and felt something in his chest that was not a growl. He tried to make it a growl. He marshaled every ounce of the lethal fury that had made grown men weep in his boardroom, and produced a sound of pure, resonant menace that should have sent this woman fleeing so fast she lost both shoes. She took a step toward him. He was bleeding from 3 places, courtesy of the ambush that had caught him mid-shift on his way back from a negotiation that had gone catastrophically sideways. Silver-laced bullets. They didn't kill an Alpha King, but they made shifting back an exercise in misery, and right now his body had simply refused the order. He was stuck, enormous and helpless, and absolutely going to tear something apart the moment he had the energy to do it. He gathered himself. He would frighten her off. She would run. This would all be fine. She crouched down in front of him, completely unprotected, honey blonde hair plastered to her face by the rain, and those absurd green eyes went wide and soft and devastated in the way that humans looked when they saw something they wanted to fix. She reached out one hand, palm up, the way you'd offer your scent to a frightened animal. The wind shifted. It hit him like a wall, floral and warm, something layered underneath the lavender of whatever product she worked with, something that was entirely her, and his entire nervous system short-circuited with a single, primal, absolute recognition. His wolf went completely quiet. Not the quiet of retreat, the quiet of a predator that had just spotted the only thing in the world that mattered. Mate. He stopped growling. He had not decided to stop growling. His body simply stopped, the command coming from somewhere older and more fundamental than his conscious mind, some ancient mechanism that had been waiting 33 years to fire and had now done so with catastrophic completeness. He stared at her. She stared back at him. Rain hammered the dumpsters. He was a king, a tyrant. He had ordered executions over breakfast without losing his appetite. She scratched him gently behind the ear. He did not move. He told himself this was tactical. He was injured, and she could assist, and that was the only reason he was tolerating the soft drag of her fingernails against the fur behind his ear. The small sound that nearly escaped his throat was a symptom of blood loss. "Okay, big guy," she said softly, with the particular calm of someone who had talked down 100 panicked animals and knew exactly how to make her voice into something safe. "You're hurt really bad, and it's really cold out here, and I know you're scared, but I'm going to help you. I promise I'm going to help you." She paused, looking him over with a professional eye that was both flattering and deeply insulting. "You look like a husky to me. A really, really, cosmically unfairly large husky. Did somebody leave you out here? That is criminal. That is genuinely criminal." Valerius considered, from within the wreckage of his circumstances, that he had never in his life been described as a husky. He was not a husky. He was an apex predator who made other apex predators reconsider their life choices. He weighed, in this form, approximately the same as a small motorcycle. She stood up, squared her small shoulders, grabbed his front leg with both hands, and pulled. He went, because his wolf refused to give her any resistance whatsoever, and because he was bleeding and the warmth coming off her was the only warmth in the entire alley. He told himself these were the only reasons. It took her 11 minutes and one spectacular fall into a puddle that soaked her to the hip to get him out of the alley and up the back stairs of her building. She narrated the entire time. She told him about her day. She told him about Mr. Biscuits. She told him her apartment was small but cozy, and she had a first aid kit. And she was pretty sure the YouTube videos she'd watched about treating injured dogs were applicable to, quote, whatever wildly illegal, exotic breed situation you've got going on. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor. It was, as advertised, small. The radiator was making a sound like a small man trapped inside it hitting the walls. There were plants on every surface and a cat bed in the corner that currently contained no cat, but had clearly recently contained several. She shut the door, turned the lock, and turned to look at him standing in the middle of her living room, dripping onto her rug, taking up approximately a third of the available floor space. She put her hands on her hips. Okay, first things first. Bath. He had, in his human life, bathed in a private suite at Apex Tower that contained a tub the size of a small vehicle and cost more per square foot than most people's apartments. He had a personal attendant who sourced his grooming products from 3 different countries. He was aware of all of this as Lily physically herded him, through a combination of firm nudges and cheerful encouragement, into a bathroom that contained a tub the size of a large salad bowl and a shelf lined with bottles featuring cartoon fruit on the labels. The strawberry shampoo hit him like a personal insult. She worked fast, with the efficient confidence of genuine expertise, talking the whole time about technique and coat health and how his fur was actually extraordinary, and she'd never seen density like this. She was not gentle. Exactly. She was thorough. She scrubbed places he had not expected anyone to ever scrub, with a focus and dedication that spoke of a woman who took her professional responsibilities very seriously, regardless of the patient's feelings on the matter. Valerius, king of the underworld, gripped the sides of the tiny tub with his claws and endured it, because every time she leaned close, that warm floral scent wrapped around him, and his wolf was not going anywhere. The blow dryer was a separate ordeal. It was loud and it smelled like warm plastic, and she wielded it with cheerful aggression. When she finally stepped back to assess her work, there was a moment of silence. Then she made a sound like she was trying not to laugh and failing. He turned his head toward the mirror above the small sink. He barely recognized himself. His fur, dried and fluffed to maximum volume, stood out from his body in a manner that could only be described as festive. He looked like a very large, very dignified wolf who had been wrapped in a cloud. He looked approachable. He looked soft. He looked, and he would carry this wound for the rest of his immortal life, adorable. The pink clip, which she produced from her jacket pocket and fastened to the fur above his left ear with the satisfied focus of a woman putting the finishing touch on a masterpiece, made a small clicking sound in the silence. Perfect, Lily said warmly, beaming at his reflection from over his shoulder. I'm going to call you Cupcake. Valerius stared at the mirror for a long moment, at the fluffy, pink-clipped, strawberry-scented reflection of the most feared being in Starlight City. Then his eyes moved to Lily, her cheeks flushed pink from the effort and the warmth, honey hair curling slightly as it dried, looking at him with an open, uncomplicated affection that no living person had ever directed at him in his adult life. His wolf purred. He was going to stay. 3 weeks passed, and Valerius had not gone back. This was, by any rational accounting, insane. He was aware of this. He had a 4,000-square-foot penthouse at the top of Apex Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city, a custom mattress flown in from a craftsman in the Northern Territories, and a private chef on 24-hour call. He had an empire to run. He had enemies to crush, and alliances to manage, and a criminal underworld that operated on the singular principle that its king was omnipresent, omniscient, and incapable of anything resembling softness. He was currently curled at the foot of Lily's bed, taking up roughly 2/3 of it, with his chin resting on her ankle. She was asleep on her side, one hand tucked under her cheek, honey blonde hair spread across her pillow, making the small, quiet sounds of a person who had no idea she was sharing her mattress with the most dangerous entity in Starlight City. The radiator was doing its trapped man impression. A draft came through the window she never quite sealed all the way. His fur kept her feet warm. This was, he had decided, a mutually beneficial arrangement. His wolf disagreed with the framing and simply called it what it was. Home. The alarm went off at 7:15. Lily slapped it twice before hitting the right spot, sat up with her hair in her face, looked down at him with the soft, bleary expression she always wore in the first 30 seconds of consciousness, and said, "Morning, Cupcake," and scratched the top of his head. He suffered this with great dignity. Then she was up, moving through the small apartment with the efficient chaos of someone perpetually running slightly late, and by 8 o'clock she was out the door with her bag over her shoulder and her uniform jacket half zipped and a piece of toast in her mouth, calling behind her that his water bowl was full and she'd be back by 5 and to be a good boy. The door clicked shut. Valerius waited exactly 90 seconds, which was how long it took her to reach the street level and walk past the building's front window, which he could confirm from the couch. Then he shifted. The transformation took longer than it should have. The silver wounds had mostly closed, but the residual toxicity lingered in the joints, and shifting always reminded him of exactly how much damage had been done. He straightened to his full height in the middle of her living room, 6.5 feet of muscle and contained menace, and stood there for a moment in the cramped space where his head nearly brushed the ceiling and his shoulders were maybe 8 inches from her bookshelf on one side and her kitchen counter on the other. Then he located the garment bag his second-in-command had left on the fire escape at precisely 6:45, retrieved it, and dressed. The bespoke charcoal suit fit him the way bespoke suits fit people who had them made by a man who'd been tailoring for 30 years and treated every commission like a personal responsibility. He straightened his cuffs. He checked his reflection in the bathroom mirror, which still had Lily's collection of cartoon-labeled shampoo bottles lined up on the shelf below it, and the man looking back at him was every inch the Alpha King. Cold-eyed, immaculate, lethal. The pink hair clip was on the edge of the sink, where Lily had left it last night after removing it and setting it there with the absent-minded care of someone who'd do it again tomorrow. He left through the fire escape, shifted once he was out of sight, covered the 6 blocks to Apex Tower in a way that no human could manage and no camera would catch, shifted again in the private garage, and was in his penthouse elevator before 8:45. His council of 7 was waiting in the glass-walled war room on the 42nd floor. They were, collectively, responsible for more fear in this city than the police force, the courts, and the weather combined. Dorian, his enforcer and second-in-command, was a man built along the lines of a structural wall and covered in enough tattoos to constitute a personal history of violence. He stood at the head of the table with a tactical briefing in one hand and the careful expression of a man who had been managing the information that his king was currently living as a house pet and had decided his life expectancy was better served by keeping his opinions on the matter entirely internal. Valerius sat down. Report. The meeting lasted 3 hours. He disassembled 2 alliances, authorized the acquisition of a rival distribution network, and made a decision about the Westbrook territory dispute that left 3 of the 7 men in the room visibly relieved and 2 visibly reconsidering their choices. He was precise and cold and absolute, which was how every meeting went, and no one who sat across from him would have believed that 6 hours ago he had been getting his ears scratched and called a good boy. At 4:40, Dorian caught him checking his watch for the second time in 10 minutes. She gets home at 5, Valerius said, preemptively, without looking up from the document he was signing. Dorian said nothing. Dorian had learned, in the past 3 weeks, that there was nothing to say. By 4:55, Valerius was back in the apartment, shifted, in position by the front door, sitting with the patient attentiveness of a dog who had definitely spent the entire day exactly here, and not, for example, restructuring a criminal empire. When the key turned in the lock at 5:03, he was already on his feet. Lily pushed the door open, saw him, and the tired lines around her eyes softened into something so genuinely happy it did something complicated to the center of his chest. "There he is," she said, dropping her bag and crouching down to hug his neck. She smelled like other dogs, and the lavender spray, and underneath it all, that irreplaceable warm floral scent that was purely her. "I missed you too, buddy." "Yes, I did." He had not indicated he missed her. He had merely been by the door. These were different things. The food situation had become a secondary crisis. Lily had gone to the pet supply shop on Crescent Street in week 1 and come home with a bag of dry kibble that featured a smiling golden retriever on the front and claimed to be nutritionally complete for dogs of all sizes. She'd filled the bowl with evident goodwill. Valerius had looked at the bowl, then looked at her, then looked back at the bowl with an expression that, in his human form, he reserved for people who wasted his time. He was a predator. He was the predator. His diet in human form consisted of things like seared A5 Wagyu at restaurants that didn't have prices on the menu and had a 4-month wait list. The beige pebbles in the ceramic bowl with the little paw print on it smelled like processed grain and disappointment. He did not eat the kibble. Lily decided he was a picky eater and began supplementing. She tried 3 other brands. She tried wet food, which was an improvement in the same way a puddle was an improvement over a drought. She tried mixing in chicken broth and looked so hopeful about it that he ate approximately a quarter of it to avoid whatever expression she would make if he didn't. He felt this was a significant personal sacrifice, and it was going entirely unrecognized. Dorian had solved the problem with the particular brand of efficient ruthlessness he applied to all logistical challenges. The first night, Valerius had woken to the soft sound of the fire escape window being eased open with professional care, and 2 of his enforcers, men who collectively had enough criminal charges in their history to staff a small prison, were crouched on the fire escape in the dark, passing a vacuum-sealed package of premium raw beef through the gap. They moved with the painstaking quiet of people who were substantially more afraid of their king than of anything else the night might contain. The arrangement became routine. Every night, between 2 and 3 in the morning while Lily slept, Dorian's team rotated through. They left the packages in the refrigerator's bottom drawer with the wordless efficiency of a very expensive, very illegal catering service. Wagyu. Occasionally lamb. Once, a container of caviar that cost more than Lily's monthly rent, on account of Valerius having expressed, through a look he gave Dorian during a brief morning debrief, that he was getting tired of beef. Lily started finding the food on Tuesday morning of the 2nd week. She opened the fridge, saw the vacuum-sealed package with the logo of a premium supplier she'd never heard of, and stood there for a full 30 seconds working through the logic. She checked her phone, She checked the lottery app she'd downloaded 3 months ago on a whim and never actually won anything on. She looked at the package again. "Cupcake," she said slowly, turning around to where he was sitting behind her in the kitchen with absolute composure. "I think I won a supermarket prize draw." She looked thrilled. She looked like someone who'd earned something. "I don't even remember entering one, but this label looks really fancy. Should I cook this for you? Can dogs have Wagyu?" Valerius maintained perfect, serene, entirely innocent eye contact. She cooked it. Medium rare, because she'd looked it up and the internet had produced several confident opinions, and she'd picked the one that sounded most reasonable. She put it in his bowl and stood back with her arms crossed and a look of expectant satisfaction. He ate it in approximately 45 seconds. She burst out laughing. "So, you're not a picky eater. You're just a food snob." She pointed at him. "You are a fancy boy, Cupcake. I don't know how a stray dog develops a palate like that, but here we are." He licked the bowl clean with great dignity. That night, he listened from the bed as she called her friend on the phone and excitedly described her winning streak with the mystery prize draw, saying she'd gotten premium beef twice now and something that she was pretty sure was high-end caviar, and she was thinking of entering more contests because apparently she had incredible luck. Her friend made the appropriate impressed sounds. Lily laughed, light and easy, and said she was going to enter every giveaway she could find. Valerius tucked his nose under his paw and closed his eyes. Dorian would simply have to keep the deliveries coming. It happened on a Thursday night in the 4th week. Lily had come home later than usual, just past 7, because one of her coworkers had called out sick, and she'd covered the last 2 appointments on top of her own full schedule. She was moving on fumes by the time she got through the door, barely managed to feed Valerius his evening meal, which Dorian's team had stocked that morning, and was asleep by 9:30 with the lamp on the nightstand still burning. Valerius had stayed awake. He did this often. He told himself it was instinct, the natural vigilance of a predator in an unfamiliar territory. But the truth his wolf kept presenting without apology was simpler. He watched her sleep because she was his, and she was unguarded, and the world outside the thin walls of this apartment was full of things that would hurt her if they could, and he would not let them. He lay at the foot of the bed, with his head up and his ears tracking every sound in the building. The pipes, the couple 2 floors up, the wind finding the gaps in the old window frames, and underneath all of it, the steady, quiet rhythm of Lily's breathing. He heard the footsteps on the stairs at 11:40, not Dorian's team. He knew the sound of his enforcers by now, the particular discipline of men trained to move without weight, the way they distributed their steps to avoid the 3rd stair from the top that creaked. These footsteps were heavy and careless and angry, which was its own kind of information. Someone who moved like that wasn't worried about being heard. Someone who moved like that was used to the idea that their arrival was the problem, not the approach. They stopped outside Lily's door. Valerius was already off the bed, on his feet, positioned between the door and the bedroom. His ears were flat. Something deep in his chest had gone very still in the way of things that were about to become very loud. The knock, when it came, was the wrong kind. The flat palm kind that was less of a request and more of a statement. Lily. The voice was male, thickened with something chemical and hot with something old. "Lily, I know you're in there. Open the door." He heard her wake, the small, sharp intake of breath, the shift of the mattress, and then a stillness that was not the stillness of someone reassured. It was the stillness of someone who had gone immediately cold. Lily. Louder this time. The door shook in its frame. "Don't make me do this the hard way." She appeared in the bedroom doorway. She'd pulled on a sweatshirt, and her hair was loose, and her face was pale in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. She looked at the door and then down at Valerius, and her jaw was tight in the way he recognized as someone performing calm they did not feel. She crossed to him quickly and put her hand on top of his head, which was not a calming gesture this time. It was contact. It was someone reaching for the nearest solid thing. "It's okay," she said quietly. And she was talking to him, and they both knew she was lying. It's okay. Just stay here. She went to the door. She didn't open it. Marcus, go home. Open the door, Lily. I'm calling someone if you don't leave. Her voice was steady. He could hear her heartbeat, which was not. I mean it. Whatever came back through the door, Valerius didn't catch the words. Only the register. Low and flat and mean. The kind of tone that had practice behind it. The kind that knew exactly what it was doing to the person on the other side. The door came open. Not unlocked. Open. The frame splintered around the deadbolt in one kick, and the door swung hard and bounced off the wall, and the man who came through was big across the shoulders and moving with the loose, slightly off-balance confidence of someone who'd had enough of something to feel invincible and not quite enough to be clumsy. He was maybe 6 feet, broad, with the specific look of someone who had once been told he was intimidating and had organized his personality around it ever since. He swept the apartment with a look that landed on Lily and didn't move. There you are, he said, like she was an object that had been misplaced. Marcus, get out of my apartment. She had backed up. She was holding her phone. I'm calling right now. He crossed the room in 4 strides and took the phone out of her hand. And the way he did it, the ease and the ownership of the gesture, the way it said she didn't get to make that choice, detonated something at the base of Valerius's skull that had no language attached to it. Just heat. Just the absolute primal erasure of every consideration except one. Lily turned. She saw what was on his face. He watched her try to read it and fail because she had never seen anything like it. Not on an animal, not on anything, and whatever she saw, it was enough to make her step between them without thinking. She put both hands on his shoulders, which barely reached his shoulders, and pushed, trying to put him behind her, trying to put her own body in the way. And she said, Cupcake, run. Go. Run! Go out the window! Go! The sound that came out of Valerius was not a bark. It was not a growl. It was not anything with an animal name. It was the sound of something that lived below the threshold of species, below the threshold of reason, the sound of a force that had been compressed into a form too small for it, and had now been given a reason to stop pretending it fit. The walls shook. The glass in the bathroom rattled in its frame. The plants on the windowsill trembled. The overhead light swung on its cord. Marcus stumbled backward 2 full steps with his hands up before his brain caught up with his body. And even then, the look on his face was pure, atavistic terror of the kind that bypassed thought entirely and spoke directly to the part of the human animal that knew what it was standing in front of. Then Valerius shifted. Lily told herself afterward, in the version she ran over and over in the first few hours, that she must have blinked or looked away, that it must have taken longer than she thought. But the truth was, she saw all of it, and it took almost no time at all. The fur split along the spine. The shoulders cracked outward and kept going. The bones didn't break so much as they remade themselves, audibly, with a sound like ice fracturing in a fast thaw, except amplified and continuous, and accompanied by the sight of a shape that was animal becoming a shape that was not, passing through something that was neither in between. The paws lengthened into hands. The muzzle collapsed. The neck expanded into a column of muscle that connected to shoulders that kept broadening until they filled the space between her bookshelf and her kitchen counter with no room to spare. The whole process lasted maybe 4 seconds and left behind, in the middle of her living room, a man. Not a man the way the word usually worked. 6.5 feet of him, built on a scale that made the apartment feel like a closet. Every muscle in his body was pulled to maximum tension, the cords in his neck visible, his forearms roped with it, his chest heaving with the force of breathing through something barely contained. His eyes were wrong. Not the dark eyes she would eventually learn were his default. These were lit from behind, amber burning through dark, the eyes of the wolf still in there and right at the surface and looking at Marcus with an expression that communicated, with complete clarity, that there was not going to be a conversation. Marcus got 1 syllable out. Valerius crossed the apartment in 2 strides and took him by the throat with one hand. One hand. The grip closed around Marcus's neck and lifted, a smooth, continuous motion, until the man's feet left the floor and he was dangling in the air in Lily's living room, making sounds that were not words, his hands scrambling at the wrist that held him, the wrist that did not move by so much as a millimeter. Valerius looked up at him with those burning eyes and held him there for exactly long enough to make the outcome absolutely clear to everyone present, including Marcus, who had gone the color of old paper. Then he turned and threw him. Not toward the door. Through the window. The glass went first, and then the frame bent outward, and Marcus went through it and kept going, airborne in the night air for a long, almost peaceful second. And then there was a thunderous crash from below that had the particular resonance of a large human body meeting a large metal dumpster, and the sound of an impact that nonetheless confirmed, to any ears listening, that the landing had been survivable. Barely. Intentionally barely. Valerius stood at the ruined window, his back to the room, his chest still heaving, the city's wet night air moving over him. The rain had started again. Of course it had. His hands were loose at his sides, but everything in his posture said nothing was loose. He was the most dangerous thing in Starlight City, and he had just reminded himself of that fact. And it took a conscious effort, a deliberate unwinding of something that wanted to stay coiled, to pull the feral back behind the line. He turned around. Lily was standing exactly where she'd been when he shifted. She hadn't moved. She was holding her own elbows with both arms wrapped around her middle, and her emerald eyes were enormous, and her face held the specific expression of someone whose understanding of what was possible in the world had just been surgically removed and replaced with something they had no framework for at all. Her mouth was open. The only sound in the apartment was the rain coming through the broken window and the radiator, which had chosen this moment to resume its usual complaints. Valerius stood there, naked and enormous and feral and entirely visible in the middle of everything he had tried not to be in front of her, and for the first time in 15 years, he had no idea what to do next. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. Valerius was aware, with a clarity that was almost funny given the circumstances, of several things simultaneously. He was aware that he was standing in the middle of Lily's living room with a broken window behind him and rain coming in off the street. He was aware that his eyes were still burning amber and his pulse was still running at a frequency designed for violence. He was aware that Lily had not moved, had not spoken, and was looking at him with those enormous green eyes in a way that said every category she'd ever used to organize the world had just been quietly set on fire. He was also aware, with a specific and urgent embarrassment that he had never in his adult life experienced before, and which he found he had no defenses against whatsoever, that he was not wearing anything. He had shifted back in a state of pure protective fury, with zero thought given to practical considerations, which had never mattered before because in every other situation in his life, where he'd shifted back in a hurry, the people present were either his own subordinates or individuals, too focused on their imminent consequences to notice anything else. Neither of those things was true right now. Right now there was just Lily, 5'4", and still holding her own elbows, staring at him. He moved. He grabbed the blanket off the back of her couch, the small pink one with the strawberry print that she pulled over herself when she fell asleep reading, the one that was sized for a person approximately half his dimensions. He got it around his waist with both hands. It covered the minimum necessary geography and no more, and he was aware of exactly how this looked, and there was nothing he could do about it. Then, and he could not have explained the impulse except that his wolf supplied it with complete conviction, he went to his knees. The floor creaked under him. He was looking up at her now, which was not a position he occupied in any other area of his existence, and he kept his hands visible and his shoulders as unthreatening as shoulders his size could be, and he looked at her face and said, in the voice that came out rougher than he intended. Don't. Don't ask me to leave. Lily's mouth closed, opened again. You're a person, she said. Yes. You were my dog. I was never your dog. Cupcake, she said, and the word came out with a kind of helpless accusation. Something moved through his chest. That name was your decision. You let me bathe you. You let me put a hair clip on you. She unfolded her arms to gesture at him, at all of him, at the general catastrophe of the situation. You ate out of a bowl. The bowl was acceptable, he said, and then, because the look on her face suggested that was the wrong direction, he pressed forward. Lily, I know what this is. I know what I owe you in terms of an explanation, and I will give you all of it, everything. I will tell you things about this city that will make the last 4 weeks look straightforward. He kept his eyes on hers. But I need you to not throw me out. I am asking you. He paused. The next part cost him something, but his wolf offered it up without hesitation, and the rest of him had run out of arguments. I will let you put the hair clips back on. If that's what it takes, I'll let you use the strawberry shampoo. I don't care. I'm not leaving you unprotected in this apartment with a broken door, and I'm not leaving you at all if I can help it. So please. The rain came through the window. The radiator complained. Lily looked at him for a very long time. Then something shifted in her expression, some high tension giving slightly, and she said, You bought me premium Wagyu beef. Weekly. I thought I won a prize draw. I know. That was, she started, and then stopped, and he saw her trying to hold something back and failing, the corner of her mouth moving against her will. That was genuinely very sweet, she finished, like the admission physically hurt her. Which makes me so angry. You don't get to be sweet. You threw a man out my window. He put his hands on you. The words came out flat and final, and the amber in his eyes flared once, and she felt it. He could tell. Felt the weight behind it. Felt the thing underneath the absurdity of the strawberry blanket and the kneeling and the pink hair clip on the nightstand. The real thing. The thing that had kept him at her door every evening at 5 and at the foot of her bed every night, and would keep him there indefinitely if she allowed it. What are you? She said softly. Not frightened now. Something else. Alpha King, he said. Of this city. Every shadow operation, every syndicate, every arrangement that keeps this city's supernatural population from tearing itself apart. That's mine. I run it. He held her gaze. And I have been sleeping at the foot of your bed for 4 weeks and eating out of a bowl with a paw print on it because you are my fated mate, and I would rather do that than be without you. Lily looked at him for another long moment. Then she said, Your name isn't Cupcake. Valerius. Valerius, she repeated, like she was testing the weight of it. Then she crossed the room, and he stayed very still because he didn't know what she was going to do, and he was discovering that not knowing what Lily was going to do was a permanent condition he was apparently going to have to learn to live with. She stopped in front of him, close, looking down at him because he was still on his knees, and she was close enough that her scent wrapped around him completely, and he felt his wolf go quiet and certain and absolutely sure. She put her hand on his face, not a slap, her palm against his jaw, her thumb at the edge of his cheekbone, and she tilted his face up and looked at him, like she was looking for something and finding it. You're beautiful, she said, which is extremely inconvenient given that I'm furious with you. I know, he said, and his hand came up and covered hers against his face, and the touch, the simple fact of her warm skin and his, closed some circuit that had been open for 33 years. He rose. He didn't rush it. He came up from his knees slowly, and she tipped her chin up to follow him. And when he was standing, he was careful, because he was enormous, and she was not. And he had spent 4 weeks learning the architecture of this apartment in a body much larger than this one. But the principle was the same. Take care. Don't overwhelm. Let her set the distance. She closed it. She rose onto her toes and pulled at his shoulder, and he bent down and kissed her. And the sound she made against his mouth was soft and certain, and his arms went around her, and she was so small and so warm and so entirely, irreversibly his, that every cold and calculated and armored thing in him simply put itself down. He kissed her like she was the first good thing he'd let himself have in a very long time. He kissed her like a man who had spent a month sleeping at the foot of a bed he wanted to sleep in properly, and had finally been given permission. The strawberry blanket was a structural problem they resolved quickly. In the morning, the rain had stopped, and thin, pale sunlight was coming through the unbroken windows, and Lily was sitting on the counter drinking coffee in his shirt, which reached her mid-thigh, watching him deal with the broken front door by propping it closed with the bracket off her bookshelf. He was in a pair of sweatpants Dorian had dropped on the fire escape at 6:45, along with a garment bag, because Dorian was efficient and had apparently been planning for this eventuality. She was wearing the small pink hair clip she'd retrieved from the nightstand. She had reached up and put it in her own hair, like it was nothing, like it was hers, which it was. She was explaining, with great energy, that she was going to have to move because she couldn't live in an apartment with a broken door when the knock came. It was her landlord. She'd met him twice, both times to complain about the radiator, and both times he had been indifferent to the point of rudeness. He was not indifferent now. He was standing in the hallway looking like a man who had received news that had reorganized his spine, and when Lily opened the repurposed door, he thrust an envelope at her with both hands. "The building," he said. His voice had the quality of someone reading from a script in a language they didn't speak. "The deed. It's yours. All of it. Your, He glanced past her. He saw Valerius. He looked back at Lily with the expression of a man making very rapid peace with his circumstances. "Your pet. Bought it. Effective this morning." He was already backing down the hallway. "Congratulations on the building." Lily turned around very slowly. Valerius was standing in the kitchen doorway with a cup of her coffee in his hand and an expression of complete innocence that was made only slightly less convincing by the fact that his default face was incapable of innocence. "You bought my building," she said. "The door needed replacing," he said. "It made sense to own the building." She looked at the envelope. She looked at him. She looked at the envelope again. Then she pointed at him with one finger and said, "You are a menace." And he said, "Yes." And she laughed, the real laugh, the light, easy one he'd listened to through her phone calls for 4 weeks, and it hit him in the center of the chest like it always did. He did not tell her, that morning, that he'd also had a structural engineer assess the building overnight, or that Dorian had arranged for the radiator to be replaced by the end of the week. Some things were better revealed gradually. She was not oblivious. She knew that now. What she was, as the weeks became months and the months folded into something permanent and settled and warm, was choosing. She had looked at all of it. The shadow empire and the amber eyes and the thing that had thrown a man through a window without breathing hard. And she had decided it was hers, that he was hers, the same way she'd decided in a rain-soaked alley that a bleeding monster was a creature worth saving. She told her friend, on a phone call he listened to from across their bedroom, in a suit that cost more than most cars, that falling in love with Valerius was the most alarming and least surprising thing that had ever happened to her. That the monster and the man were the same thing, and she loved the whole picture. The cold, ruthless king and the creature who had let her blow-dry his fur into a puffball and accepted a pink hair clip with more dignity than the situation warranted. She still bought the strawberry shampoo. He pretended to tolerate it. He had placed a standing order. In the 42nd floor war room of Apex Tower, 8 months after a thunderstorm changed everything, Valerius sat at the head of the table while 6 of the most dangerous men in Starlight City waited for him to render a decision that would reshape 3 syndicate territories and had implications reaching into 4 other cities. His phone lit on the table. He looked at it. He picked it up. He texted his wife, "Out of the strawberry shampoo. The good kind with the strawberry on the bottle." He put the phone down. He looked up at 6 faces performing various levels of discretion. He said, "The Westbrook expansion is approved. Dorian has the terms." He straightened his cuffs. "We're done." He was home by 5. If you enjoyed this hilarious mistaken identity shifter romance audiobook, please hit the like button and subscribe for more epic stories.